Hi everyone, my name is Lauren,
And my name's Rihanna.
I'm Alicia.
and today we're going to be talking about the women's rights movement and more specifically women in labor and go through our slideshow for you.
The concept of intersectionality or intersectional feminism is a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. According to Crenshaw, it is a prism for seeing the way in which various forms of inequality often operate together and exacerbate each other. In her paper, Mapping the Margins, Intersectionality, Identity Politics, and Violence Against Women of Color, Crenshaw talks about how social and systemic aspects of identity, such as race, gender, and sex, intersect, and how this intersection creates different privileges, disadvantages, discrimination, and prejudices. This identity-based approach may be a source of strength, community, and intellectual development, as it can bring topics and issues of society towards the mainstream. The issues that will be explored are how gender plays in the labor movement seen in the women's movement, the issue of paid and unpaid labor, and finally, how race and gender intersect in the labor industry.
All right, so a little bit about the background. The history of the women's movement for equal rights is one that has been hard fought and one that is continuous. As we know, there have been women fighting for equal rights in many different categories of society. One subsection of these rights that need to be fought for is women in labor and equality rights within and outside of the workplace. The impact women have made in history of labor is often missing from textbooks and media, and their roles of organizing, documenting, and inspiring other workers to fight for better have been pushed into the shadows. In the 1990s, the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, one of the largest labor unions in the United States, took to the streets with countless women chanting, speaking, and walking to fight for equal labor rights. For example, the Triangle Shirtwaist factory that went up in flames due to bad working conditions led to the death of 146, mostly young women, due to the lack of an evacuation plan and accommodated exits of the building. This event led to more walkouts and protests. Women also fought in the courtrooms for laws and policy that would protect women in the workplace and bring equality. The unequal treatment in the workplace often has an underlying discrimination factor due to the other female identities. This is where the intersectionality comes into play. Looking into where we are now, there are still gaps in the workplace. Not only is there a lack of acknowledgement of women in a professional setting, but there's also a lack of awareness for the jobs and unconscious roles that women play in a domestic setting. Women are still working to bring light to this injustice, even though people are aware of the stereotype and systematic assumptions, but there has yet to be major change.
So as Lauren was talking about the respect for the women in the workplace, one of the questions is, so why is this happening? So the definition of occupational segregation is when one demographic group is overrepresented or underrepresented among different kinds of work or different kinds of jobs. This is one of the root causes of gender pay gaps and difference between job opportunities for men and women. The inability to reach high-level positions is what causes such a disconnect. So what can we do to close this gap? A brief yet very important way society can mend the disconnect between women and the workforce must first begin with the individuals in position of power. They are responsible for the wage gap between their employees. The opportunity to conduct pay audits and how individuals' qualifications differ will help fix the gender wage gap. This proposal aims to analyze all aspects of women in the workforce. Firstly, by analyzing the paid labor of women that results in lesser wages than men, less government benefits, and having to work more years than a man to match their economic production output. Next, we will be analyzing the unpaid labor aspect that affects women, which Lauren just previously mentioned. So over the course of history, women took on labor-intensive jobs where they received no pay, resulting in them being part of very unsafe working conditions. Not only were women stuck in unpaid jobs within the workforce, but they're also stuck in an unpaid lifestyle that society forces onto them. Women are still to this day being forced to have children and stay at home rather than focus on a career. Lastly, this proposal will focus on the intersectionality of women in the workplace. Women not only face gender discrimination daily, but all parts of their identity also come under attack. In regards to examples such as their immigration status, marital status, children's status, and stereotypes, which affect all women in work environments, causes interference between a successful career. So for our CVA project, focusing on the women's right movement, we specialize in the labor aspect. So to start with, we're going to be focusing on the paid labor of women. As society progressed, so did the number of women in the workplace. Although the population of women grew, they were met with a harsh reality. Women were not equal to men, not only regarding positions, but in regards to their salaries. Women were unable to reach positions of power in any organization. Given society's gender roles, most people, specifically men, believed that women were incapable of leadership qualities and that they eventually later in life would have deemed the would have deemed the interest in creating a family forcing women to shift their priorities, resulting in less time at work and productive outputs. As a consequence of facing these struggles, women were met with wage gaps in all workplaces, regardless of their educational status and positions within their jobs. For centuries, the women's dollar has been significantly less than the man's. Even in 2020, the US Labor Department stated that the women's dollar is 80 cents compared to the men's whole dollar. Due to the lower wages, women all across the world are forced to work years after a man retires, as they are viewed as not creating enough products for the company in regards to paying taxes and spending their money. Not only are women earning less money and working longer, but this has a direct impact on government funding that citizens are able to access in their elder years after paying Social Security taxes. Women receive Social Security benefits that are an average of 80% to the man's 100%. Benefits are based on a person's 35 highest earning years, and when women have a higher risk of interruptions within their lives, which was previously mentioned, wage gaps further reduce women's benefits. In addition to women earning less within their jobs, resulting in less retirement benefits according to bookings, women also live longer than men, forcing them to spread their savings over the course of a longer period. Lower salary doesn't only affect women's current status in their careers, but it also has long-term effects for the rest of their lives. The visual shown to the right, which we can see, represents a man that is already 3 steps ahead of a woman, just like males are in the workplace regarding their income and positions of power within their roles. No matter how fast women work or climb up the stairs, the man will always have the head start. This visual emphasizes not only regarding income, but in all aspects of the career and life, after men will always be 3 steps ahead than the woman.
I'm going to focus on unpaid labor. After a long day at work or like in the factories, women's work would continue when they got home, as they were expected to take care of children, clean the house, put food on the table. Women were seen as incapable to work outside of the home, as it was already seen as a man's job. And when the women entered the workforce, they were not treated fairly. The work around a household was traditionally left to the women. In domestic labor, women have been doing for centuries is work that in a professional setting, any human would be paid for, such as cooking, cleaning, and taking care of children. Women have been performing these jobs for years with no pay and very little recognition. In a professional setting, women can do the same amount of work as men and not earn any money. This all leads back to the unpaid labor in the home and the longstanding stereotype and expectation that women are supposed to do this work, no questions asked, with little benefits for them. During the pandemic, households were spending more hours on the unpaid domestic work of cooking, cleaning, homeschooling while in lockdown. Women have been seen to disproportionately bear the extra work in addition to their paid job. Women working from home are almost twice as likely as men to have reduced their working hours at their actual job. This shows that this expectation is still present. A prime example is the visual I chose for this movement. The image I chose is seen here is an infographic released by the UK government promoting citizens to stay home and save lives. The image shows women taking care of kids, homeschooling children, and doing domestic chores, while the only image that has a man was depicted relaxing on a sofa. The image was then withdrawn from social media after going viral and faced criticism for being sexist. There was shock that this infographic was signed off and released in 2021 due to how progressive our world has become and is still becoming. The visual clearly expresses how unpaid labor has affected women and has affected how people see women in a domestic work setting. It is an example of patriarchal ideas about women and how unpaid labor is so ingrained that it showed up on a government poster and no one throughout that whole process recognized it. Was this an issue due to lack of representation of women in the government workplace? This is also where intersectionality comes into play.
As briefly discussed about paid and unpaid labor, social constructions of gender and race are systematically related to labor market dynamics to generate inequality. Evidence to support this claim about the labor market can be supported by the intersection of these 3 topics: discrimination, stereotyping, and immigration. Economist Adam Smith's concept of the invisible hand means that there are unseen forces that impact the free market through actions based on individual self-interest. The invisible hand of discriminatory practices stems from stereotypes and racial biases that are rooted in the workforce, as is the automatic categorization of men and women in specific roles in the workforce. For example, research found that Black women in the corporate world were alienated in the white male-dominated environment and had less resources, networks, and promotional opportunities compared to white men and women. They also found that Black women were stereotyped as incompetent and unqualified, and more recently, unprofessional, discriminating against their natural hair. The reason for this is that companies and employers make decisions regarding hiring, promotions, and wages based on the employee's race and gender. Stereotyping is conforming to a fixed or general pattern, which is also a standardized mental picture that is held in common by members of a group and that represents an oversimplified opinion, prejudiced attitude, or uncritical judgment. Racial stereotyping is what gives way to discrimination in the workplace, especially in the domestic workforce. For example, African American women used to make the majority of the domestic work industry. However, employers now prefer to hire Latina immigrants because they're seen as outside white middle class English speaking circles and are seen more docile and easier to manipulate, taking advantages of the language barriers and their citizenship. In the same approach, employers are less likely to employ Filipinas because they tend to be well educated and fluent in English. These stereotypes perpetuate the systemic discrimination in the workforce for women as their race, gender, and status intersect. The visuals on the slides confront racial stereotypes and provide commentary on race in the contemporary US society. In the pictures, we see a domestic scene of one woman in a maid uniform serving the other, and a group of women at a nail salon. These racial assumptions, however, are flipped in the pictures, which reveals the conflict between race and their categorized stereotype roles in the workforce. Because of the freedom and creativity that it offers, arts and visuals can be used to uphold traditional culture codes and maintain social order. In social movements, however, visuals can be used and are essential in calling for personal and collective social transformation. Visuals are put to political and social means and used to confront these traditional codes that are harmful and prejudiced. Whether it be images, photos in magazines, newspaper articles, ads, fine art, murals, and other mediums, visuals are useful in presenting ideas of a social movement to the masses in a quick and efficient way.
And here are our resources. And thank you guys for watching.